He and his wife moved in without asking suitcases, smiles, and entitlement. For weeks, I stayed quiet, pretending peace was worth my silence. But that morning, as the smell of her perfume filled my kitchen, I realized something. Love shouldn't require disappearing. So I told them to go. And when the door closed behind them, for the first time in years, the silence finally belonged to me. The intrusion. Eleanor Grant balanced a paper bag against her hip and nudged the front door open with her elbow. The Seattle drizzle clung to her gray coat, turning the edges dark and heavy. The house greeted her with the same quiet it always had until it didn't. 2 glossy suitcases sat in the middle of the living room like uninvited guests. One was plum-colored, the other a silvery gray that caught the afternoon light and threw it back, defiant. Her pulse quickened. She shut the door behind her, careful, as though closing it too fast might make the scene disappear. Madison Blake stood near the piano, the faint scent of her perfume replacing the lavender Eleanor usually kept in the room. Madison's honey-blonde hair was pulled into a sleek knot, her posture perfect, her smile bright enough to imply innocence but not apology. "Oh, hi, Eleanor," she said, as if they'd run into each other at the market instead of inside Eleanor's home. "Just a few days while our place is being remodeled. No call, no permission, just occupation, smooth as silk." Eleanor's grip on the grocery bag tightened. "Remodeled?" Madison nodded cheerfully. "Oh, you know how old houses are. The contractor found mold behind the bathroom tiles. It's a nightmare. We had to move out right away." "We?" Eleanor asked, though she already knew. "Ryan and me," Madison said lightly, as though stating the weather. "He's still at the office, poor thing. You know how the deadlines pile up at Westbridge Media." Eleanor placed the groceries on the counter, lining up the apples just to have something to do with her hands. "And you thought to come here?" Madison tilted her head. "Well, of course. Ryan said you wouldn't mind." "Ryan said that?" Madison's smile widened, but her eyes skated past Eleanor's. "I mean, it's just a few days." She gave a soft laugh that landed somewhere between charm and dismissal. Eleanor took off her coat, hanging it with deliberate care on the hook near the door. "Did you ask the owner before you moved in?" Madison blinked, caught off guard. "The owner?" "Yes." Eleanor turned, her voice calm but carrying. "Me?" Madison gave a small laugh. Too high, too quick. "Oh, Eleanor, you're funny. I'm serious." For a second, Madison's expression faltered, but then she smoothed it back into her usual brightness. "We're family. You're not really saying no to family, are you?" Eleanor didn't answer immediately. The rain against the window filled the silence like a steady breath. "When will Ryan be here?" she asked. "Around 6, Madison said, glancing at her phone. "He's grabbing dinner on the way." Eleanor nodded once, more to herself than to Madison. "Then I'll wait to talk with him." Madison's relief was visible. Shay mistook composure for surrender. "Perfect," she said, brushing invisible lint from her sleeve. "You'll see, it's easier this way. Besides, we'll stay out of your way." She moved toward the hallway with the ease of someone already settled. Eleanor heard the faint click of the guest room door opening, the creak of the dresser drawer sliding out. Eleanor stood alone in the living room, surrounded by the scent of Madison's perfume and the quiet betrayal of her son's assumption. She thought of the nights she'd spent alone after her husband's death, how she had rebuilt her life in this house, room by room, breath by breath. And now, without so much as a knock, someone had claimed her space again. She walked to the window, watching the rain streak down the glass. Madison's laughter drifted faintly from the guest room, the sound too loud, too comfortable. Eleanor took a deep breath. Calm was armor. At 6:30, Ryan arrived, shaking the rain from his jacket. He looked tired, the faint shadow of stubble softening the sharpness of his jawline. "Hey, Mom," he said, leaning in for a kiss on her cheek. "Sorry for the short notice." Eleanor met his eyes. You didn't give any notice. He blinked, the easy confidence slipping just slightly. I thought Madison texted you. She didn't, he sighed, dropping his briefcase beside the couch. It's just for a few days. The contractor says the bathroom's a mess, and you know how hard it is to get temporary housing right now. You assumed I'd say yes. He smiled faintly, the same boyish grin that used to get him out of trouble as a child. You usually do. That's true, Eleanor said, setting the table with quiet precision. I usually do. Madison appeared, hair down now, looking as though she belonged here. I was telling your mom it's just temporary, she said, wrapping her arm around Ryan's. We'll barely be a bother. Eleanor turned to face them both. Temporary things have a way of becoming permanent when no one sets boundaries. Madison frowned, not quite understanding the warning beneath the politeness. We won't overstay. Eleanor's gaze softened, but her voice stayed firm. I hope not for everyone's sake. They ate dinner together, takeout that Ryan had brought from the Thai place on Rainier Avenue. The meal was pleasant enough, but every bite carried the weight of unspoken rules. Madison chatted about her design clients. Ryan half listened while checking his phone, and Eleanor watched them both, feeling the walls of her sanctuary closing in. After dinner, Madison started clearing dishes. You don't have to, Eleanor said, standing. Oh, I insist, Madison replied brightly. It's the least I can do. She turned on the tap, water running, her tone casual. I'll take care of utilities, to maybe $50 for the water bill or something. Eleanor froze for just a second. $50. A token gesture, polished to sound generous. She looked at Madison's back, at the effortless way she filled space that wasn't hers. The water isn't the problem, Eleanor said softly. Madison turned off the tap. What's that supposed to mean? It means, Eleanor said, you should have asked. Ryan glanced up from his phone. Mom, it's not a big deal. We're family. Eleanor looked at her son, the man she'd raised, the man who now spoke as if her boundaries were inconveniences. Family doesn't erase respect, Ryan. It's supposed to strengthen it. Madison crossed her arms. You're overreacting. Eleanor's smile was faint but unyielding. Maybe. Or maybe I've just stopped underreacting. The rain outside deepened, whispering against the glass. For a moment, no one spoke. Madison broke the silence first, forcing another bright smile. I'll just finish these dishes. Eleanor stepped forward, taking the dish towel from her hands. Leave them. I'll manage. Madison hesitated, then backed away, the smile flickering. Ryan sighed and stood. We'll keep out of your way, okay? Just for a couple of nights. Eleanor nodded once, her voice calm. We'll talk in the morning. When they disappeared into the hallway, she turned off the kitchen light and leaned against the counter. The hum of the refrigerator filled the silence. The house felt strange under her feet, as if it were holding its breath. She looked at the suitcases, still standing in the living room, untouched since she'd come home. A symbol, a test. For the first time in a long while, Eleanor didn't flinch at the thought of confrontation. She only felt the weight of reclaiming what was hers. She whispered into the still air, Did you ask the owner before you moved in? And this time, the quiet answered back. The unspoken years. Later that evening, the front door opened with a familiar ease. Ryan, Blake Eleanor's only son, stepped in, carrying 2 more bags, his tie loosened, rain still clinging to his hair. He smiled as though everything were perfectly ordinary, as though boundaries were optional when blood was involved. Hey, Mom, he said, leaning down to kiss her cheek before setting the bags on the floor. Sorry for the mess. We'll be out of your way in no time. Eleanor's eyes moved to the suitcases already crowding the hallway. You've multiplied, she said quietly. Ryan chuckled, missing the weight in her tone. Just until the renovation's done. A week, maybe 2. He opened the refrigerator without asking, reached for the pitcher of water, and poured himself a glass. It was such a small act habitual careless, but it pressed against something deep in her chest. "I hope you don't mind," he said, gulping it down. "Madison's already unpacking. You know how she is, can't sit still until everything's perfect." Eleanor folded her hands in front of her. "I noticed." He grinned, oblivious to the undercurrent. "She means well. She even brought that candle she likes, the one that smells like— what is it? Cedar and smoke?" "Invading a space doesn't smell better because it's scented," Eleanor murmured. "What? Nothing." She turned away, picking up the grocery receipt she'd left on the counter earlier, studying it as if it mattered. Ryan leaned against the fridge, casual, comfortable. "You okay? You look tense." She forced a small smile. "I'm fine." "Good," he said, stretching his arms. "Because honestly, this is such a lifesaver." I was about ready to book a hotel, but Madison said, "Why bother when Mom's got that extra room? I mean, we're family, right?" The word family landed like a pebble in a pond, rippling out until it distorted the reflection of everything she'd worked to keep still. Eleanor pressed her palms against the counter. "Ryan," she said slowly, "do you remember how long I worked at Morrison's diner?" He frowned, thrown by the question. "What does that have to do with anything? Do you remember?" He shrugged. "Forever, it felt like. I used to joke with my friends that my mom knew every fry cook in downtown Seattle." 18 years, she said softly. "Morning shifts, double shifts, graveyards. I used to walk home on Fifth Avenue at midnight because I couldn't afford the bus fare, all so we could keep this house." "Mom," he said gently, "you don't have to." "I do," she interrupted, her voice trembling. Not with anger, but memory. Because when I think about those nights coming home to a cold kitchen, my hands smelling like grease, my feet swollen from standing 12 hours, and now I see you standing there, helping yourself to water as though you built this place. She trailed off, the words catching like fabric on a nail. Ryan set down the glass, the humor draining from his face. "I didn't mean—" "I know," she said, quieter now. "That's what makes it worse." He rubbed the back of his neck, uneasy. "Look, we didn't mean to make you feel— what's the word, invaded. It's just temporary." Temporary. The word echoed the way thunder does long after the lightning has passed. "You said that when you borrowed money for your first car," she said. "You said it when you moved in after college. Every temporary thing seems to last until I'm too tired to ask when it ends." He sighed. "You always make everything sound heavier than it is." "That's because I carried it," Eleanor said. "All of it." He looked away, jaw tight. "You know, it's exhausting when every conversation turns into a guilt trip." Her heart gave a slow, tired twist. "You think I want to guilt you, Ryan? I only want you to remember the things I gave up so you could build a life that didn't rely on this house anymore." He laughed softly, but there was no warmth in it. "I did build a life. You just don't like who's in it." Eleanor studied him, the way his eyes darted, how his shoulders squared in defense. He looked so much like his father in that moment that she had to steady herself against the counter. "When your father left," she began, "I told myself I'd raise a man who would understand gratitude, not because I needed thanks, but because I wanted you to never forget where you came from. Mom, stop making it sound like I'm ungrateful. Then stop acting like this house is yours to walk into without knocking." They stared at each other, the years between them stretching taut and thin. Then, as quickly as it had risen, the storm passed. Ryan looked away, his voice smaller. "I just thought it would make things easier. For everyone." "Easier," she repeated. "For who?" He didn't answer. He grabbed his jacket from the chair, slinging it over his arm. "I'll talk to Madison," he said, his tone clipped. "We'll figure something out." She wanted to tell him not to leave angry, but the words froze in her throat. He hesitated at the doorway. "You know, sometimes it feels like nothing I do is ever enough for you." Eleanor's eyes softened. "That's not true." You were enough the moment you were born. I just wish you'd remember I'm more than what I gave you." For a heartbeat, something flickered in his eyes, a quiet shame, or maybe the ghost of understanding. But it faded before it could take shape. "Dinner tomorrow?" he asked. "I'll bring takeout again." "Madison's obsessed with that curry place." She nodded. "Fine. Good." He half smiled, like that settled everything, and left with the sound of the door closing behind him. Eleanor stood in the dim kitchen, the hum of the refrigerator louder than before. She looked down at the water glass he'd left half full on the counter. A thin ring marked the wood beneath Ida's small circle, but permanent. She picked it up, washed it carefully, and set it to dry beside the sink. The tap dripped once, twice, like the rhythm of an old clock reminding her how long silence could stretch between mother and son. In the next room, Madison's laughter floated faintly through the air, bright and false, as she rearranged the pillows on the couch. Eleanor turned off the kitchen light, letting the shadows reclaim the space. The house, once her refuge, now felt borrowed, and yet, beneath the ache, something fierce began to steer a quiet, steady decision forming in the dark. She whispered to herself, not out of bitterness but resolve, "This time, I won't stay silent." The boiling point. The morning broke gray and wet, the kind of Seattle drizzle that turned the windows into moving watercolor. Eleanor moved through the kitchen quietly, her slippers making soft sounds against the tile. The coffee machine hissed. She stood at the counter, watching the steam rise, hoping that the warmth in her hands would settle the unease twisting in her chest. From down the hall came the sound of Madison humming, cheerful, off-key, far too early for that kind of brightness. The sound carried like perfume, artificial and lingering. Eleanor closed her eyes. When Madison entered, she was already mid-sentence. "I was just saying to Ryan this neighborhood would rent for a fortune." "You've got such a charming little place, Eleanor." "Charming little place." The words landed like a pat on the head. Eleanor forced a smile. "It's not for rent." Madison laughed, misreading the weight in her tone. "Oh, of course. I just mean, if you ever wanted to rent it out, it'd be snapped up in a heartbeat." Ryan appeared behind her, hair damp from the shower, scrolling on his phone. "Babe, don't start giving Mom ideas. I'm not moving furniture again." Madison rolled her eyes playfully. "Relax. I'm just saying she's sitting on gold." Eleanor set her coffee cup down and wiped her hands with deliberate calm. "Gold doesn't mean much when you've already earned your peace," she said. Madison tilted her head, smile still glossy. "Peace is nice. So's equity." Ryan laughed, distracted, and went to pour himself cereal. The sound of the spoon against the bowl was small, ordinary, and unbearable. Eleanor took her cup and walked toward the living room before her thoughts could sharpen into something she couldn't swallow. Through the window, the maple tree was shedding its last leaves. They spiraled down, soft and certain. Outside, the world respected gravity. Inside, it seemed to have forgotten it. "Eleanor," Madison called from the kitchen. "We were thinking maybe we should help with utilities while we're here. You know, to make it fair." Eleanor turned slowly. Madison leaned against the counter, holding her mug with both hands as though generosity were something fragile. "Maybe $50 for the water bill?" Ryan looked up from his phone. "See? Told you she'd appreciate that." Eleanor stared at Madison, at the perfect hair, the manicured nails tapping the mug, the way she waited for praise like a student offering a polished apple to a teacher. "That's kind of you," Eleanor said, her voice steady but distant, "though I don't remember sending an invoice." Madison blinked, the smile faltering for a second. "Oh, I didn't mean—" "I know," Eleanor said. "That's what makes it worse." The silence after that was the kind that changes temperature. Madison looked toward Ryan, as if waiting for him to fix it, to smooth the air between women with the same bloodline of patience. Ryan cleared his throat. "Mom, she's just trying to be respectful." "Respectful," Eleanor repeated softly. By deciding what my respect is worth? Ryan frowned. It's just $50. Eleanor's eyes lifted to meet his calm and sharp. That's exactly the problem. The air in the room shifted again, heavier now. Ryan went back to his cereal, the milk crackling like static. Madison pretended to check her phone. Eleanor took her coffee and disappeared down the hall. The guest room door was open. The first thing she noticed was the smell Madison's perfume mixed with detergent. On the bed, clothes were neatly folded, the kind of order that said, "I've moved in." Toiletries lined the dresser in perfect rows. Moisturizer, perfume, foundation, hair serum. The vanity mirror had smudges that weren't hers, and in the corner, a laptop glowed with a familiar hum, plugged into the outlet she once used for her reading lamp. This wasn't a temporary stay. It was a quiet occupation. Eleanor stood there for a long moment, feeling the air leave her lungs slowly, as if her body had to teach itself not to tremble. The years of compromise, of swallowing words, of stretching herself thin enough to be invisible came back all at once. She thought of the first time Ryan had come home from college, how he'd left his laundry everywhere, certain she would fold it. The time he'd borrowed her car and returned it with the tank empty, saying he was running late. The time she'd said no to a loan he wanted for Madison's business, and how his tone had changed, sharp and cutting, like she was suddenly less than a mother, more like a vault he couldn't open. She had built her life around the hope that if she gave enough, love would stay gentle. But giving had turned into erasing. She touched the dresser top, tracing her finger through the faint dust beside Madison's perfume bottle. Her reflection in the mirror looked older than she felt, not because of age, but because of accumulation. When Madison appeared at the door a moment later, smiling as though nothing were broken, Eleanor didn't turn around. "Ryan said you might be resting," Madison said lightly. "I didn't mean to intrude." "You're already here," Eleanor said. "The intruding's been done." Madison blinked, unsure whether to laugh or apologize. "I'll make dinner tonight," she offered instead. "I found that salmon you like in the freezer. You've been working so hard." "I don't work anymore," Eleanor said, turning to face her. That was the point. Madison hesitated, the brightness dimming. "Well, I just mean, you deserve a break." "I've been on one for years," Eleanor said. "This house was supposed to be it." Madison forced another smile, the kind people wear when conversation turns into glass. "You know, I think maybe you just need to adjust. We're not here to take over, Eleanor. It's just temporary." Eleanor took a slow breath. Temporary is what people say when they plan to stay until you stop noticing. Madison's jaw tensed. "That's unfair." "No," Eleanor said quietly. "It's overdue." Ryan's voice carried from down the hall, calling for Madison. She turned to go, but Eleanor's next words stopped her. "This house isn't available for rent or rescue," she said. "It's mine." Madison turned back slowly. "Excuse me?" Eleanor stepped closer, her voice low but certain. "You heard me. I've spent too much of my life making room for people who mistake my kindness for vacancy." Madison crossed her arms, trying to recover her confidence. "We're family, Eleanor. Don't make this awkward." "It already is," Eleanor said. "And family doesn't mean you get to redecorate someone's piece." Madison stared at her, lips parting to reply, but finding no words. Finally, she muttered, "Ryan won't like this." "I'm sure he won't," Eleanor said. "But I'm not raising him anymore." Madison left, her footsteps clipped and tight, the air she left behind sharp with perfume. Eleanor stayed in the doorway, the sound of the rain outside sinking with her heartbeat. For the first time in years, she felt the weight of her spine solid, upright, present. Later, Ryan came in, expression tense. "What did you say to Madison?" "The truth." "Mom," he said, exasperated. "Can't you just try to get along?" "I've been trying since the day she walked in with her suitcases." He sighed, rubbing his temple. "You always have to make things difficult." "Difficult," she repeated, You mean not convenient? He dropped his hands. You're overreacting. Eleanor looked at him, at the man her boy had become, at the easy dismissal he'd inherited not from blood but from habit. She spoke quietly, almost tenderly. You've lived your whole life assuming I'll bend. I won't break, Ryan, but I'm done bending. He shook his head, frustrated. You're impossible. No, she said. I'm finally possible. He didn't know how to answer that. He grabbed his keys instead, muttering something about getting air. When the door closed behind him, the silence filled the room again, not empty this time, but earned. Eleanor stood still, her hand resting on the doorframe. The faint scent of Madison's perfume lingered, but it already smelled weaker, thinner, as though the house itself was exhaling it. She walked back into the guest room, unplugged the laptop, and set it on the bed. The glow vanished. The room dimmed to something honest again. Then she opened the window. The air outside was cold and wet, carrying the smell of cedar and rain. She let it in, every breath of it, until the last trace of someone else's presence lifted. She whispered to the room, to herself, to the house that had never stopped waiting for her to claim it fully. It's mine. And for the first time, she believed it. The confrontation. The rain came harder that night, flattening the maple leaves against the windows like pressed memories. The house smelled faintly of lemon cleaner and tension, that sharp, artificial calm before a storm that everyone pretends not to notice. Eleanor stood at the sink, rinsing a cup she didn't need to clean. Her hands moved just to stay steady. Ryan's voice reached her from the living room. Mom, we need to talk. He never said we need to talk unless he'd already decided he was right. She turned, drying her hands on a towel, and faced him. Madison was there too, sitting on the edge of the couch, arms folded, her phone face down beside her. She looked polished, but her eyes were tired. Ryan stood behind her like a lawyer who'd already chosen his argument. Eleanor stayed near the kitchen doorway. Then talk. Ryan took a deep breath. Look, I get that you've been under stress, but this whole thing, he gestured vaguely around the room, it's gotten out of hand. You're overreacting. Her heart ticked like a clock. Overreacting, she repeated. Yes, he said. You've been acting. Off, like everything's an attack. Madison's tone was gentler. We know you've been through a lot, Eleanor. It's just, sometimes you take things the wrong way. Eleanor leaned against the counter, the towel still in her hand. What way would you prefer I take them? Ryan sighed, pacing. You always think people are trying to take something from you. We were just trying to help. By moving into my home without asking? It's our home, he said automatically, then corrected. Well, yours technically. But, she laughed softly. Technically, Madison jumped in. What Ryan means is, you've always said this house is for family. We thought you'd want us here. I did want family here, Eleanor said, until I realized I'd stopped feeling like part of it. Ryan looked at her, confused. Where is this coming from? From years, she said, voice low. Years of saying yes when I wanted to say no. Years of being told I was too sensitive when I finally spoke up. Years of working myself raw just so you could grow up thinking comfort was automatic. He flinched, jaw tightening. This again. Yes, she said. This again, because you never hear it the first time. He exhaled sharply, running his hand through his hair. Mom, you're doing it again, making everything about the past. Why can't we just move forward? Because you keep pretending the past was easy for me to survive. Madison looked away, fiddling with her ring. This is really unfair to Ryan. Eleanor's eyes softened on her daughter-in-law. Unfair would be letting him keep believing he's owed a woman's silence just because she loves him. Ryan's tone rose. You're twisting everything I say. No, she said quietly. I'm finally untwisting it. The clock on the wall ticked louder, filling the pause. Do you even hear yourself? He asked. You act like you've been mistreated. You've had it better than most people your age. A house, retirement, no bills. Because I earned them, she said sharply, then steadied her voice. Because I sacrificed every comfort I had so you could have yours. Do you know what that costs a person to give and never ask to be seen? Madison's voice was small. She's just tired, Ryan. No, Eleanor said. I'm not tired. I'm done. That stopped him. She stepped forward, not loud, but every word cut clean. You've lived your life, expecting women to make things easy, me, Madison. Every person who's ever had to soften so you could stay comfortable. And do you know why? Because I taught you that. I taught you that love means bending until you forget your own shape. But I was wrong. Ryan's mouth opened, then shut. The argument he'd prepared no longer fit the moment. Madison looked between them, uneasy. Eleanor, maybe we should take a break. This isn't helping. It's helping me, Eleanor said. She turned to her son. Do you remember the day your father left? You were 10. You asked me if it was your fault. Ryan blinked, caught off guard. Why are you bringing that up? Because I told you it wasn't, and I meant it. But what I didn't tell you is that after he left, I made a promise to myself that I would never make you feel unwanted. That I would say yes, even when I couldn't afford to. That I would give until you never had to ask. Ryan's voice was quiet now. You did. And look where that got us, she said. You stand in my kitchen and call me sensitive because I finally ask for space. He took a step closer. You're twisting it. I'm just saying. Stop, she said, holding up a hand. Stop explaining me to myself. The rain outside thinned to a mist, the kind of soft drizzle that felt almost apologetic. Inside, the silence stretched, fragile and electric. Madison finally spoke. Maybe we should go stay somewhere else for a while. Ryan spun toward her. What? No, that's exactly what she wants. Eleanor smiled faintly. It's not what I want. It's what's fair. Ryan stared at her as though seeing her for the first time. You really want us gone? I want to stop disappearing, she said. You've asked what's wrong with me all week, but the truth is, there's nothing wrong. I've just learned how to say no. The words landed like truth always does, softly, then permanently. Ryan's shoulders dropped. You're unbelievable, he muttered, turning away. Eleanor's voice followed him, even. You'll understand someday, he laughed bitterly. When I'm old and lonely? When you're tired of mistaking love for obedience. Madison rose quietly, slipping her phone into her pocket. I'll pack a few things, she said. Give everyone some air. Ryan looked ready to protest, but she touched his arm not tenderly, just firmly enough to remind him that arguments have walls. He sighed, grabbing his jacket. Fine, whatever makes everyone happy. Eleanor watched them gather their things, the familiar ache rising again, the ache of loss, of love, of letting go. She wanted to reach out, but she knew this was the kind of pain that healed only after silence had done its work. As Ryan opened the door, the night air swept in cold and clean. He paused. I never meant to make you feel like this. I know, she said. That's the point. He hesitated, eyes flicking toward her, but no apology came, only confusion. Then he stepped out into the rain. Madison followed. The door closed softly behind them. Eleanor stood still, her reflection faint in the window. The streetlights cast a thin, amber line across the floor, catching the dust that floated where voices used to be. Her chest rose and fell once, deeply. The quiet felt strange, almost holy. From the table, she picked up the half-empty mug Ryan had left earlier. The ring of moisture it left behind on the wood shimmered under the light. She wiped it clean with her sleeve. The hum of the refrigerator filled the house again, steady, unbothered. She listened, breathing in rhythm with it. In the mirror above the piano, she caught her reflection. Tired, yes, but anchored. her own. For a long moment she said nothing. Then, softly, as if confessing to the walls that had seen her become both servant and survivor, she whispered, "I'm not angry. I'm awake." Outside, the rain stopped. Inside, Eleanor Grant stood alone, not abandoned, but reclaimed. The expulsion. The morning broke pale and washed out, the kind of gray that smelled like unfinished rain. Eleanor sat at the kitchen table long before the clock reached 7, hands wrapped around a mug gone cold. The house was awake but not alive, footsteps above, the faint hum of Madison's hairdryer, drawers opening and closing like short arguments. Every sound had the weight of pretense. When Madison finally came down, she was dressed in a crisp cream sweater and jeans too white for November. Her perfume arrived first, something floral and confident, followed by that bright, unbothered smile. "Morning, Eleanor," she chirped, pouring herself coffee as if the kitchen were hers by birthright. "I hope you don't mind. I used the oat milk. Ryan said it's fine." Eleanor's voice stayed even. "Ryan doesn't speak for me." Madison paused mid-pour, eyes flicking up, a thin smile reforming. "Of course. I just meant, I know what you meant." Eleanor's tone wasn't sharp, just final. The silence that followed was long enough for the clock to clear its throat. Ryan appeared next, hair damp, tie loose, the expression of a man who wanted peace but not responsibility. "All right," he said, grabbing a banana from the counter. "Let's not start the day like this." Eleanor watched him, the way he avoided her eyes, the way his hand lingered near Madison's waist as if comfort could erase what was coming. "We started this day a long time ago," she said. Ryan frowned. "What's that supposed to mean?" She pushed her mug aside and rose. "It means it's time for you both to go." The words landed like a door slamming shut in slow motion. Madison blinked. "Go where?" "Anywhere but here." Ryan laughed once, a short, disbelieving sound. "You're kidding!" "I'm not." Madison's mouth dropped open. "Eleanor, you can't be serious. I've never been clearer." Ryan's voice sharpened. "You're kicking your own son out?" Eleanor's reply was calm, steady, and impossibly soft. The kind of mother who finally learned that loving herself isn't selfishness, it's survival. For a moment, no one spoke. Even the hum of the refrigerator seemed to hold its breath. Madison recovered first, clutching her mug as if for balance. "Eleanor, you're upset. Yesterday got out of hand, and you said things you didn't mean." "I meant every word," Eleanor said. "And I'm saying them again, so you'll remember." Ryan's jaw clenched. "So that's it? After everything? After raising me, you just throw me out like some stranger?" Eleanor's gaze softened, but her spine stayed straight. "I'm not throwing you out, Ryan. I'm letting myself stay in." Madison crossed her arms, voice tightening. "What will people say when they find out? That you kicked your family out over some argument?" Eleanor turned to her. "People have been misunderstanding me my entire life, Madison. I'm used to it." Ryan's tone darkened, half anger, half wounded pride. "Maybe I'll tell everyone exactly what happened, how my own mother couldn't handle having her son close, how you threw us out for no reason." Eleanor looked at him, and for the first time, the exhaustion left her face. She wasn't tired anymore, she was done. "Tell them," she said simply. "Tell them every version you want. Tell them I refuse to keep living as a guest in my own home. Tell them I chose peace over guilt. Tell them your mother finally stopped auditioning for approval." Madison shifted uncomfortably. "Ryan," but he wasn't finished. "You know what? Maybe I will. Maybe they should know what you've become. I hope you're happy when everyone sees who you really are." Eleanor smiled faintly, a weary grace in it. "I already know who I am. That's why I can finally stand here without shaking." Her words hung there, quiet, unstoppable. Ryan looked away, fingers raking through his hair, pacing like someone trying to find a door that wasn't there. "I can't believe this." "You will," Eleanor said. "Sooner than you think. Madison's voice was smaller now, caught between guilt and disbelief. "Where are we supposed to go? We didn't plan." "You had time to plan everything else," Eleanor said. "You'll manage." Ryan slammed his banana onto the counter, voice rising. "This isn't who you are!" Eleanor met his gaze, unflinching. "You've mistaken who I was for who I'll always be." He opened his mouth again, but she raised her hand not in anger, but in finality. "Enough! You've taken up enough of my silence. Now I need the space it left behind." Madison turned toward Ryan, whispering, "Let's just go. You can't win this." He looked at her, incredulous. "We're really just walking away?" Madison's voice cracked. "Maybe walking away isn't losing." Eleanor said nothing. She only watched as they gathered their things, Madison's perfume bottles clinking in a cosmetic bag, Ryan's laptop cords tangled in his frustration. The house filled with small sounds of departure, zippers, drawers, the soft thud of suitcases against the hallway walls. When they reached the doorway, Ryan paused. "You'll regret this," he said, voice low. Eleanor's eyes met his. "I've spent most of my life regretting what I didn't say. This won't be one of those times." Madison hesitated, turning back once more. "Eleanor, I didn't mean for things to get this far." Eleanor's tone softened just a fraction. "Then let that mean something. Leave before they do." Madison nodded, a ghost of shame crossing her face. She stepped outside first. The sound of rain swallowing her footsteps was almost merciful. Ryan lingered, hands in his pockets, jaw set. "You always think you're teaching someone a lesson. Maybe you're just scared to be alone." Eleanor smiled sadly. "I was scared for years. Then I realized solitude isn't the same as abandonment." He stared at her for a long moment, then left without another word. The door closed. Eleanor stood still, listening to the silence return. It didn't rush back angrily, as she expected. It eased in like a tide reclaiming its shore. Her knees felt weak, but her heart was steady. She walked to the window. Outside, the maple's branches bent in the wind, shaking off the last stubborn leaves. Across the street, Mrs. Patel's hydrangeas stood brave in the drizzle. Eleanor smiled faintly. Her phone buzzed once on the table. A text from Ryan. "Hope you're happy." Another followed. "You'll regret this." Eleanor stared at the screen for a moment, then pressed and held until the conversation muted. The tiny bell icon turned gray. The world went still again. Her gaze drifted to the small frame by the piano, her and Clara Jennings at Pike Place Market, two younger women laughing with wind in their hair, bags of tulips in their hands. Clara had been fearless even then, always saying the things Eleanor only dared to think. She could still hear her voice, frail but resolute from that hospice bed 3 years ago. "You can't live your whole life waiting to be allowed to live," Eleanor whispered into the quiet. "I'm not waiting anymore, Clara." She walked slowly through the house, touching the furniture she'd dusted for years, the piano she hadn't played since Ryan's wedding, the framed picture of her younger self holding her son on his first day of school. She wasn't angry. She was awake. She brewed fresh tea, sat by the window, and watched the rain fall harder. Across the street, Mrs. Patel waved, wordlessly, knowingly. Eleanor waved back. For the first time in years, she didn't rush to fill the quiet. She let it stretch, wide and gentle, wrapping itself around her like a long overdue embrace. She could hear her heartbeat in the silence, strong and certain. She closed her eyes, letting the moment settle into her bones. This wasn't loneliness. It was freedom, and this time, it had her name on it, the aftermath. The silence came first, not sudden, but gradual, like a tide retreating from shore. The house exhaled as if it had been holding its breath for months. The faint scent of Madison's perfume still clung to the hallway, mingled with the sharp trace of Ryan's cologne. The air carried their absence in fragments, a forgotten hairpin on the counter, a folded shirt left on the back of a chair, a single mug with lipstick on the rim. Eleanor stood in the doorway of the living room, hands clasped in front of her, and simply looked. Every inch of the apartment bore evidence of intrusion, subtle but heavy. The throw blanket on the couch no longer smelled like lavender. It smelled like someone else's detergent. The television remote sat in a different place. Her favorite reading lamp was unplugged. Even the houseplants, which she'd tended faithfully every Sunday morning, seemed to droop under the weight of unfamiliar voices. She moved slowly through the space, gathering what remained. A sweater Madison had draped over the armrest, Ryan's socks half tucked under the couch, an empty bottle of sparkling water left on the coffee table. She folded each thing neatly, as though caring for them one last time before letting them go. Her movements were careful, not angry, not resentful, only deliberate, like a ritual of reclamation. When she reached the guest room, she hesitated. The bed was unmade, the dresser drawers left slightly open, the faint outline of Madison's perfume bottles still marking the dust. Eleanor picked up a forgotten charger cord, wound it neatly, and set it aside. Then she stripped the bed, the sheets, the pillowcases, the duvet cover, and carried them to the laundry. As the washing machine hummed to life, she leaned against it, listening to the sound. It was steady, predictable. Her heartbeat found its rhythm again inside it. By afternoon, the apartment began to change. The faint clutter of other people dissolved into quiet order. The windows opened, inviting in a breeze heavy with rain and cedar from the street below. The city outside moved on buses passing, dogs barking, the hum of life continuing, but inside. The noise no longer pressed against her. It drifted around her like a lullaby she finally understood. Her phone buzzed once on the counter. She glanced at the screen. "Ryan, hope you're happy." She didn't respond. Another vibration followed moments later. "Madison, I hope your pride's worth it." Eleanor stared at the words, feeling no anger, only an odd clarity. She pressed the side button until the screen went dark, then opened the drawer and set the phone inside. The silence that followed was not empty. It was earned. She brewed tea chamomile, the kind she used to make late at night when Ryan was small and feverish, the kind she hadn't made for herself in years. The steam rose gently, curling against her face like an old friend. She carried the cup to the window seat, the one she'd avoided lately because it faced the world outside, a world she'd forgotten how to sit still in. Seattle was soft that evening, washed in silver light. The rain had thinned to mist, and the clouds hovered low, pressing the horizon into watercolor. Across the street, the neon sign from the bakery on Pine Avenue blinked in slow rhythm, "Open." For once, she didn't feel the urge to move toward it. She was already open enough. Eleanor sipped her tea, letting the warmth settle in her chest. She thought of Clara Jennings again, the way she'd smiled through the pain near the end, voice raspy but fierce. You can't live your whole life waiting to be allowed to live. For years, Eleanor had misunderstood that. She'd thought living meant holding on to people, to duty, to the illusion that love required sacrifice. But now, in the quiet, she understood Clara's meaning. Living wasn't about holding on. It was about finally letting go without apology. She rose and began to move through the apartment again, one last sweep. In the living room, she rearranged the couch to its old position, facing the window rather than the television. She returned the reading lamp to its corner, plugged it in, and turned it on. The glow was soft, golden familiar. The shadows of the room changed shape instantly, as though the walls themselves remembered her. From the bookshelf, she took down a photo frame. Ryan at 10 years old, grinning with missing teeth, his arms slung around a beagle they'd rescued that same summer. She traced the edge of the glass with her thumb. "You were so small," she whispered. So was I. Her chest ached, but it was the kind of ache that told her healing had begun. There was a knock at the door, brief, uncertain. Her heart gave a small jolt, expecting Ryan, but when she opened it, it was Mrs. Patel from across the hall, holding a small basket of scones wrapped in a towel. "I heard voices this morning," Mrs. Patel said kindly. "Everything all right?" Eleanor smiled faintly. "Everything's quieter." "Good," the woman said, handing her the basket. "Quiet is underrated." Eleanor thanked her, promised to return the basket, and closed the door. She sat again by the window, breaking off a small piece of scone, letting the crumbs fall onto the napkin. Outside, the clouds broke just enough for a sliver of light to touch the edge of her window pane. For the first time in years, she didn't rush to check if anyone needed her. She didn't look at the phone. She didn't think of what she should have said differently. She simply existed. The quiet wasn't haunting, it was healing. As night settled, she turned off every light but one, the lamp near her chair, and let the room dim into soft amber. The reflection in the window showed her face surrounded by darkness, calm and certain. The wrinkles she'd once hated seemed less like flaws and more like a map, a record of where she'd been, the roads she'd taken alone. Somewhere outside, a car door slammed, a faint echo of Ryan's anger lingering in her memory. She inhaled deeply and let it go. The sound didn't belong to her anymore. When the tea cooled, she set the cup down gently, folded her hands, and closed her eyes. The hum of the refrigerator, the ticking clock, the faint rain returning against the glass, all of it formed a rhythm she hadn't noticed before. It wasn't loneliness. It was presence. Eleanor opened her eyes again and whispered into the stillness, "This silence finally belongs to me." Her words didn't vanish into the air. They settled softly into the walls, the floor, the heartbeat of the home that had waited years to hear them. And for once, there was no echo, only peace. The sisters' call. The next morning, the city woke under a veil of light, rain thin, silvery, and tender, the kind that made Seattle look half dreaming. Eleanor stood by the window, sipping coffee from the same mug she'd used the night before. The quiet in her apartment had deepened overnight, not empty, but full of breath, of release, of something fragile and true finally unburdened. Then the phone rang. The sound cut through the stillness like an echo from another life. She glanced at the screen. Diane Carter, her sister, Portland. The call she'd been expecting. Eleanor waited 3 rings before answering. "Morning," Diane said, her voice brisk, as if politeness could soften what was coming. "I just talked to Ryan." Eleanor closed her eyes. "Of course you did. He's upset, Elle. I'm sure he is." A sigh crackled through the line. "He says you told him and Madison to leave, that you threw them out." "I told them to go," Eleanor said simply. "That's not the same as throwing. Depends who you ask." Diane's tone was calm, cautious, the kind of careful that came with distance. "He's your son, Elle. Maybe you overreacted." Eleanor leaned against the counter, tracing the rim of her mug with her thumb. "You always did think calm meant correct." "I'm not judging," Diane said, though the words arrived wrapped in judgment. "I just think he's family. You know how things get twisted when pride gets involved." "Whose pride?" Eleanor asked softly. There was a pause. "Does it matter? It does when mine is finally standing up straight." Diane went quiet. Eleanor could almost see her sister's face lips pursed. Hand on hip, standing in that tidy kitchen of hers with the lemon-colored tiles and the smell of fresh coffee. Diane always looked put together, always had advice, always had a way of turning guilt into good manners. "Look," Diane said finally, "you've been through a lot, especially after Harold died. Maybe you're still sensitive." "Ryan probably didn't mean—" Eleanor interrupted gently. "Do you remember when you lived here after your divorce?" Diane hesitated. "Of course I do. Why?" "Nearly a year," Eleanor said. "You slept in this very apartment, at the end of that hall. You had boxes everywhere, laundry on the couch, friends over on weekends. And I never complained. Not once." Diane's voice softened. You were a saint for that, Elle. I've always said so. Eleanor smiled faintly. Do you remember why you moved out? I met Peter, Diane said. We decided to start over. Eleanor nodded slowly, even though her sister couldn't see it. That's one version of it. The truth is, I was afraid to ask you to leave. I was scared you'd think I didn't love you. That you'd call me cold. That you'd stop calling altogether. Silence on the other end. But do you know what that year taught me? Eleanor continued, her voice quiet but clear. That silence isn't kindness. It's erasure. Diane exhaled, her voice lower now. Elle, that's not fair. It's true, Eleanor said. I disappeared a little, every day, so you could stay comfortable. I let Ryan and Madison do the same. And every time, I told myself it was love. Isn't it? Diane asked softly. Eleanor shook her head, staring out at the dripping eaves of the roof below. No. Love doesn't mean giving someone permission to forget you exist. Diane was quiet again. When she spoke next, her voice had changed lower, more tentative. You sound different. I am, Eleanor said. I think I finally stopped mistaking peace for permission. There was a rustle, the sound of Diane moving around her kitchen. You always had a dramatic streak, she said lightly, though her tone trembled at the edges. Eleanor smiled. And you always had a way of calling honesty melodrama. Maybe, Diane said. Or maybe I just hate seeing you push people away. I'm not pushing, Eleanor said softly. I'm just standing still for once. The world's been spinning around me for so long, I forgot how it feels to have both feet on the ground. A pause. Then, almost reluctantly, Diane said, Ryan's hurting. Elle. You know how boys are with their mothers. They carry everything like an accusation. Eleanor took a slow breath. Then maybe he'll finally understand how it feels. The line went quiet again. A bird called faintly outside a warbler, maybe. The world beyond the window was gray and damp, but it was awake. Diane cleared her throat. I just don't want you to regret this. I don't, Eleanor said. I regret the decades before this. The ones where I said yes, just to keep from being alone. I never knew you felt that way. That's because you never asked. There was no cruelty in her tone, just truth. It landed gently, but it landed. Eleanor sat at the table, her eyes moving to the stack of mail she hadn't touched in days, electric bill, circulars, a postcard from a church she no longer attended. Ordinary things that suddenly felt lighter without the weight of apology. Diane sighed again, softer now. You always were braver than me, Eleanor smiled. No, I just got tired first. A faint laugh came through the line. Maybe you're right. Maybe I would have stayed forever if you hadn't said anything back then. And maybe I would have kept shrinking. The rain outside thickened again, tapping gently against the glass. Do you hate him? Diane asked suddenly. Eleanor's voice caught for just a moment. No, never. I just finally love myself more. Diane didn't answer right away. When she did, her voice was small, almost childlike. That sounds lonely. It's not, Eleanor said. It's honest. There's a difference. A long pause followed, the kind of silence that held both distance and understanding. Then Diane said quietly, He'll come around. Maybe, Eleanor replied, but I won't wait for permission to breathe until he does. The clock ticked softly in the background. The line hummed. I should go, Diane said at last. Peter's waiting. But, Elle? Yes? I'm proud of you, even if I don't understand you yet. Eleanor smiled, eyes wet but steady. That's a start. They said goodbye, and the call ended. The apartment filled again with quiet, that deep, deliberate quiet that comes after truth has been spoken. Eleanor set the phone down on the table and turned toward the window. The light outside had shifted, the clouds breaking, revealing a small, stubborn patch of blue. The maple tree shimmered, dripping silver. She opened the window slightly. Cool air brushed her face, carrying the scent of rain and earth. Somewhere below, a bus rumbled past, heading toward downtown. Life moved on, as it always did. But she was no longer moving to keep up. She whispered to herself, voice low and steady, no more disappearing. And this time, she meant it. The closing scene. The knock came just after noon, 3 light taps, hesitant, polite. Eleanor was halfway through folding laundry, the radio murmuring a low jazz tune in the background. She didn't need to look through the peephole to know who it was. There was a certain rhythm to her son's presence, even in silence, that mix of impatience and guilt that lingered like a scent. She opened the door. Ryan stood there alone. The gray sky behind him framed his figure like a photograph, a man half-grown, half-lost, his shoulders slightly hunched under the drizzle. He wore the same jacket he'd had on the day he left, though it seemed to fit him differently now. In his hand, a set of keys dangled, clinking against the metal zipper of his duffel bag. "Hey, Mom. Hey." Her voice was steady, calm, as though it were any other day, as though their last words hadn't drawn invisible lines neither of them knew how to cross. "I came to get our stuff," he said. "Just the rest of it. Madison's things, too." Eleanor nodded. "They're in the hallway closet. I boxed them up for you." He stepped inside carefully, as if worried the floor might reject his weight. The faint smell of cedar and rain followed him in. His eyes flicked around the living room, the rearranged furniture, the new calmness that seemed to settle like sunlight across every surface. He noticed the absence of clutter, the air that belonged entirely to her now. "You changed things," he said. "I put them back," she replied. He gave a small, humorless smile. "Right." He moved around the apartment quietly, collecting pieces of a life he no longer shared, a book left on the counter, a jacket on the coat hook, a photo Madison must have framed of the 3 of them at Thanksgiving. He paused at the picture, his thumb brushing over his wife's smile. "She wanted to come," he said softly. "I told her I'd handle it." "That was kind of you," Eleanor said. He looked up. "I don't know if that's the word you'd use." "I would," she said. "Kindness doesn't always feel good." He didn't answer. The silence between them stretched, not hostile, just human. He closed the box, lifted it carefully, and carried it toward the door. When he turned back, she was still standing there, hands clasped loosely in front of her, her face calm in a way he didn't recognize. It unsettled him, that steadiness. It reminded him of something he'd forgotten, that his mother was not made of endless elasticity. He cleared his throat. "Anything else you want to say, Mom?" Her answer came softly, almost like a sigh. "Yes." She stepped closer, her eyes warm but unyielding. "I love you, Ryan. I always will. But I'm done sacrificing my peace for your comfort." He blinked, caught between defense and understanding. "That's harsh." "It's honest," she said. "There's a difference." He shifted his weight, the box pressing awkwardly against his hip. "So that's it? You just draw a line?" "I draw a door," she said. "When you're ready for a relationship built on respect, one where I don't have to disappear to be loved, my door will be open." He stared at her for a long moment. She could see the flicker of emotion pass across his face, confusion, pride, hurt, maybe even recognition, but it never settled. He nodded once, stiffly, as though afraid that if he spoke, the moment would break. "Okay," he said finally. "Okay," she echoed. He turned and opened the door. The wind outside carried in the scent of wet asphalt and pine. For a brief second, he looked back, not forgiving, not understanding, just acknowledging. Then he stepped through, and the door closed behind him with a soft, final click. Eleanor stood there, listening. The echo of his footsteps in the hallway faded. The quiet that followed was different now, not heavy, not hollow. It hummed. She walked to the window and looked out. The city stretched before her in gentle motion, traffic moving like veins of light, people carrying umbrellas down wet sidewalks, a man walking his dog under a canopy of dripping trees. Life continuing, unbothered. She pressed a palm against the cool glass. Her reflection looked back at her, lined, tender, but awake. On the table sat Ryan's old coffee mug, chipped at the rim. She picked it up, rinsed it out, and placed it in the cabinet. No drama, no hesitation, just quiet order. In the background, the jazz station switched to a slow piano piece. The notes were soft, deliberate, the kind that lingered longer than they played. She let it fill the apartment as she sat back down, the tea she'd made earlier now lukewarm but comforting. The maple tree outside shivered in the wind. She watched the last few leaves detach and fall, one by one, weightless. For years, she'd feared moments like this, the endings, the silences, the solitude. But now she realized endings weren't empty. They were space. She leaned back, closing her eyes. The hum of the refrigerator, the faint rhythm of rain against the glass, the muted sounds of the city buses, laughter, footsteps distant but alive. It wasn't loneliness. It was freedom. And for the first time, it felt like home.